I worry about the way in which Mandela, the idea of Nelson Mandela, is used, the way it's deployed in our national narrative. Specifically, I think of the idea of what Cornel West, the African-American scholar, spoke of around the death of Nelson Mandela, where he says we're witnessing the Santa Clausification of Nelson Mandela, and specifically that is Mandela as the cuddly teddy bear grandfather figure. And in that, there's almost a suppression of a lot of feelings of black anguish, black pain at the black condition in South Africa right now. And what's quite interesting, or rather what's quite painful for a lot of us, is to see how his entire legacies are condensed into this, teddy bear legacy. We don't get to hear, if we are hearing about the Rivonia trial, we're hearing a very small piece of the speech that's invoked to sort of keep a very sort of a narrative that really does serve white interests. We don't get to hear about Nelson Mandela, who speaks about ending white supremacy, who speaks about ending inequality. We don't get to hear the Nelson Mandela who speaks about the Freedom Charter. It's quite amazing to see how that figure is deployed and evoked almost as a way to silence a lot of black people. And you also see the same thing in the States. For example, if you follow Black Lives Matter, you'll often hear people saying, oh, well, Martin Luther King wouldn't have done that. And in the same way, you witness how there's a very selective memory that is deployed when speaking about those kind of figures in a way that then suppresses the real kind of reconciliation that we can have, reconciliation that speaks to justice, retribution, those kind of things. That's not something that we get to have if we're going to continue to look at Nelson Mandela as the teddy bear. I think the idea of the Rainbow Nation is one which a lot of young people are pushing back against increasingly. It's one in which a lot of young black South Africans feel is very violent. It erases a lot of experiences of black pain as a result of an inherited economic or socioeconomic structure that hasn't really changed, transformed, or decolonized itself since the fall of apartheid. And I think there's no way where we see that pushback more strongly than at UCT, where supposedly these young born frees who have supposedly all the opportunities are saying it's not good enough, that we can't breathe. We are experiencing black pain in these historically white institutions. And I think that the way in which Rainbow Nation is deployed, it is often used as a means to silence. It's often very manipulative, such that you can't speak out about the trouble that we still experience as black South Africans today in the post-apartheid landscape. It speaks to, or it doesn't allow us to speak to, the unfinished business that we have. And I think that young black South Africans are having their voices heard, saying that this is something that we don't subscribe to. I think long term, yes, definitely most of us would like to live in a Rainbow Nation, but we will not want to live in a situation where we deploy it for the sake of expediency, as it has been in the past. I think overall it's important for us to realize that the time to continue deploying the idea of the Rainbow Nation is really up. I would like to see a celebration where we're seeing a lot more of the contributions of various heroes and heroines who've contributed to where we are as a country. And of course, it's your Subukos, it's your Bikos, but there are also a lot of unsung heroes that are there as well. There are a lot of women who are not spoken of. We don't speak about Tendiwe Mtinso, who was one of the highest ranking MK leaders. There's so many. We don't speak about Phyllis Ndandela. We don't speak about so many women who have contributed to this. And for example, we don't even do enough justice to Winnie Mandela even. So I think that for me would be a way to do better for his own legacy, to bring in a lot more of the varied contributions that have been instrumental in getting us to where we are today. I think that if we're ever to have any real chance of getting to any ideals of non-racialism, as promoted by the likes of Nelson Mandela. I think that we have to ask ourselves some very hard questions. We have to be very serious about the project of decolonization. I think we've had a great precedent that's set by the students of the Rhodes Must Fall movement, who've said that the status quo is not good enough. We need to ask far harder questions than we have when we speak about things like transformation. It needs to be deep-seated. We need to speak about economic transformation, economic redistribution. We need to speak about justice. And for me, those would be the best ways with which we can honor Tata Madiba, if it is that we can ask ourselves the hard questions and act on what it is that we find if we're going to go into this project of decolonization.